My cherished brother-in-law got my partner expecting. My in-laws defended him and kept it secret. Around her final trimester, they pressured me to adopt his child and manage their finances. But I had already started devising my vendetta. Being me 30 male, never thought I'd be sharing this shit. Need to get this off my chest. Completely blindsided by the 3 people who were supposed to have my back. My wife, my brother, and my own fucking mother. Here's how it all went down. Working as a cybersecurity specialist for the past 5 years. Started at a small tech security firm. Worked my way up to senior threat analyst. We handle network protection, data breach prevention, security audits, that kind of stuff. Not the sexiest work in the world, but pays enough for me to buy a decent 2-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood 2 years ago. Bought it before marriage. My company might not have the name recognition of Google or Apple, but we're solid. Great base salary. Annual bonuses that usually hit around 15 to 20,000. Health benefits that actually cover things. 401k matching. The kind of stability most guys my age are still dreaming about. My boss, Victor, 44 male, took me under his wing when I first started. He's this old school security expert who transitioned to management, but still keeps his hands dirty with code. Didn't just teach me security best practices, showed me how to navigate company politics, how to negotiate my salary, got me an extra 14,000 on my last promotion, and how to manage client expectations without promising the impossible. Then my wife, now ex, Natalie, 27 female, walked into my life at a friend's house party 3 years back. She was this gorgeous brunette who worked as a dietitian at the local hospital, specializing in diabetes care. We had this instant chemistry that everyone noticed, one of those connections that feels like you've known someone for years. What first caught my attention was how she lit up talking about her job, not just surface-level stuff, but the technical aspects of dietary management. She could explain complex nutritional procedures in a way that made sense even to a tech guy like me. Smart. Dedicated, invested in her career. Exactly what I was looking for. We dated for a year before I proposed. She cried, said yes, and we had a small wedding at her parents' lake house. Just 50 or so people, close friends and family. I spent 2 months' salary on the ring, 2.3 carat diamond with a platinum band. For context, my younger brother Greg, 26 male, has always been the golden child. 4 years younger, but somehow always the center of attention. Better looking, better with people. Better at charming our mom into getting whatever he wanted. He played varsity football in high school. I was the chess club kid who built security systems in my free time. Classic mama's boy situation. I was the quiet, responsible one who worked hard, but never quite measured up in mom's eyes. Dad was always fair with both of us, but Greg was definitely mom's favorite. That dynamic never changed. The contrast between us was almost comical at family gatherings. Christmas 3 years ago. Greg showed up 2 hours late. No side dish like he promised, but with some girl he'd met the night before instead. Instead of being annoyed, Mom fussed over both of them. While I had been there since morning helping prep the turkey, Dad just shook his head and poured me an extra glass of bourbon when Mom wasn't looking. Dad's a retired civil engineer. Logical, methodical, plays by the rules. He taught me how to change oil in my first car, how to fix a leaky faucet, all that practical dad stuff. He never understood my cybersecurity work, but respected that I'd found a solid career. Mom's a former high school French teacher, retired early when Dad's engineering firm took off. Always had a soft spot for Greg, who she called her sensitive artistic soul. After college, I went straight into cybersecurity. While Greg bounced around between jobs, he'd work somewhere for a few months, get bored, then quit. Always had some story about toxic management. Meanwhile, his credit card bills somehow became Mom and Dad's problem. Twice I bailed him out of minor legal trouble. Once for driving with an expired license, and once for trespassing at an ex-girlfriend's apartment. Cost me nearly $3,500, which he promised to pay back as soon as things turned around. Eventually, I helped him get a position at my company in the sales department. Victor, my boss, was hesitant. He'd met Greg at our company Christmas party the year before, and wasn't impressed, but I vouched for him, said I'd keep him in line. Greg had the charm for it, and I figured having him there would give him some stability. Plus family looks out for family, right? The sales job at our company came with a good base plus commission. Not bad for someone with Greg's spotty resume. I spent 3 weekends coaching him on our products. The industry terminology told him this was his chance to build something real. He seemed grateful, said all the right things. Victor gave me one of those, "I hope you know what you're doing" looks when I introduced them. Natalie and I settled into married life pretty well. Our relationship wasn't Hollywood movie material, but it was solid. We talked about starting a family maybe in a year or two. I spent weekends working on the house, installed a new kitchen island, built a deck in the backyard, all that homeowner stuff. Natalie decorated the place, making it look like something out of those home design magazines. I put about $22,000 into home improvements over that first year. New hardwood flooring in the living room, upgraded the master bathroom with a rainfall shower and heated floors, landscaped the backyard. Every penny I put in was raising the property value, plus giving us a place we both loved. The first year was good. We had our routines. Saturday morning waffles, Wednesday date nights, the occasional weekend trip to her parents' lake house. We hosted game nights with friends, took a cooking class together, all that couple stuff you're supposed to do. We seemed happy. About a year in, I got assigned to a major project at work, rebuilding the security infrastructure for a big hospital chain. The irony isn't lost on me now. I was working longer hours, often coming home after Natalie was asleep. Weekend work became normal. The project was supposed to last 3 months but stretched to 6. I started missing those Saturday waffles, those Wednesday date nights. The project was a career maker, successfully implementing a new security system for a $2.5 billion company. Would put me on the fast track for a senior architect position. Bigger salary, stock options, more control over which projects I worked on. I explained all this to Natalie, and she seemed to understand. She even brought me dinner at the office a few times during those first weeks of overtime. During this time, Natalie made a new friend at work, Olivia, this travel dietitian from Chicago, who was doing a 6-month rotation at our hospital. Olivia was everything Natalie wasn't. Single, carefree, kind of wild. Suddenly Natalie was going out for girls' nights with Olivia, and coming home with stories about clubs I didn't know existed in our city. I was too busy with my project to really notice how much things were changing. Things started feeling weird about 4 months before things imploded. Right around when my big project was wrapping up, the system was finally launched, and I was looking forward to getting back to normal life with Natalie. But somewhere along the way, normal had shifted. Natalie's schedule got unpredictable. She'd always been consistent with her hospital shifts. 3 10-hour days, then 4 days off. But suddenly she was picking up extra shifts, and going out with coworkers more often. When I asked, she'd say the hospital was short-staffed, or that her friend Taylor was going through a breakup and needed support. I checked our bank statements one night, and noticed Natalie had been withdrawing $200 to $300 in cash every week for the past 2 months. When I asked about it casually, she said something vague about preferring cash for small purchases and girls' nights out. Made sense on the surface, but it was new behavior. I tried to reconnect, suggested we take a weekend trip to celebrate my project being done. She said she couldn't get the time off. I offered to cook her favorite dinner. She texted last minute saying Olivia needed her help with something. A rational person might have connected these dots sooner, but I was still operating on trust. 6 years of building security systems had trained me to look for multiple data points before declaring a breach. I needed more evidence. Then there was the phone stuff. She'd be texting constantly with this little smile on her face. But the second I walked in the room, phone flipped over. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd say just Taylor or work group chat. After I got Greg the sales job at my company, he started coming to office happy hours more. Natalie would show up too, saying she wanted to support both of us. There was this one night at Murphy's where I got stuck talking to a client who showed up unexpectedly. I was across the room for maybe 45 minutes. When I finally broke free, I found Natalie and Greg in this deep conversation in a corner booth, heads almost touching. They jumped a little when I walked up. Greg immediately launched into a story about a potential lead at the hospital where Natalie worked, how they were discussing an in with the procurement department. Made sense on the surface. What didn't make sense was how Greg's hand lingered on Natalie's arm a beat too long, or how Natalie's cheeks were flushed in that way I recognized from our early dating days. But again, my own brother, my own wife, I filed it away as an anomaly, not a pattern. Greg started showing up at our place unannounced too. He'd bring Natalie these little gifts, her favorite tea from that specialty shop downtown, fancy chocolates or candles she liked. When I thanked him for being thoughtful, he'd say, "Just looking out for my sister-in-law?" I actually thought it was nice at the time. Freaking clueless. At work, Greg was actually doing well in sales. Hit 115% of his quota 3 months in a row. Started dressing better. Seemed more focused. I was secretly proud that my helping him had paid off. Coworkers would congratulate me on straightening Greg out, and I'd feel this misplaced sense of brotherly accomplishment. Then about 2 months after, Natalie started getting sick in the mornings. I'd hear her in the bathroom at 6 a.m. The shower running to mask the sounds. One morning I got up to check on her. held her hair back while she threw up. I suggested maybe she was pregnant, and she freaked out, like genuinely panicked, said it was just a stomach bug going around the hospital. She immediately scheduled a doctor's appointment, but didn't want me to go with her. Said it was nothing to worry about. I'd been tracking her cycle on my calendar. We were supposedly trying for a baby after all. She was 2 weeks late, which had never happened before. I didn't press her on it though. Figured she'd tell me when she was ready. Maybe she wanted to be sure before sharing the news. My friend Thomas, who works in hospital administration, not at Natalie's hospital, met me for drinks around this time. He asked how things were going, and I mentioned Natalie's mysterious stomach bug. "Morning sickness, bro," he said with a wink. I told him Natalie denied it, and he got this weird look on his face. "You two still trying?" When I said yes, he just nodded and changed the subject. Later that night, he texted me, "Hey man, not trying to cause trouble, but how's Greg doing at your company?" I replied that he was doing fine, hitting his sales targets. Thomas never explained why he asked. Around this time, Mom started acting weird too. She'd call Natalie directly, instead of calling our home phone like usual. When I'd be around during these calls, Natalie would say things like, "Yes, I got that recipe," or "I'll check that sale." But the conversations seemed longer than they needed to be. Once I walked in while they were on speaker, and Mom quickly said, "Oh, David is home, we'll talk later." Mom had always liked Natalie, but suddenly they had this new closeness. They'd go shopping together, had inside jokes I wasn't part of. Mom even gave Natalie a family heirloom necklace that had been promised to my future wife since I was a kid. When I mentioned being surprised by this, Mom said, "Well, she is your wife now, isn't she?" Something in her tone felt off. Everything fell apart on a Tuesday in March. I was working from home, while Natalie had a shift at the hospital. I'd made plans to surprise her with her favorite Thai takeout for dinner. When she got home, hoping to reconnect after weeks of feeling distance between us, around lunchtime, I got an email notification that a furniture delivery I'd been waiting on was scheduled for tomorrow. I needed to confirm the time slot, but couldn't find the original confirmation in my inbox to reply to. We shared a desktop computer in our home office that we both used, Natalie for her continuing education, and me for personal projects. I was logged into my email account, but remembered Natalie sometimes organized my emails when using the computer. She was big on inbox zero. While I let emails pile up, I figured maybe Natalie had seen it and moved it to a folder. So I logged into her email to see if she'd forwarded it there. That's when I saw an email thread between her and my mom, with the subject line, "Don't let David find out." My stomach dropped. I sat there staring at that subject line for what felt like forever. There was this voice in my head saying, "Close the browser, respect her privacy," but a louder voice saying, "What the fuck is this about?" I started reading through the thread, hands shaking, and it was like getting punched in the face repeatedly. Emails going back 3 months, between my mom and Natalie, discussing how to hide Natalie's affair with Greg. The earliest emails were vague, Mom asking Natalie if she was sure about this path, and warning her to be more careful around David. But they quickly became explicit. Mom was actually giving her advice on how to cover it up, when to claim hospital shifts, what excuses to use, even offering her house as a meeting place when Dad was out golfing. "Frank always plays 18 holes on Tuesdays, so you have at least 4 hours," one email read. Mom had created a detailed schedule of when Dad would be out of the house, for Natalie and Greg to use. My own mother plotting behind my back. Then the bomb. The latest emails were about the pregnancy. Natalie was 2 months pregnant, confirmed by her doctor, and they weren't sure if it was mine or Greg's. The timing overlapped with both of us. There was an email with Natalie panicking, after I suggested the morning sickness might be pregnancy. My own mother was telling my wife to pass it off as mine either way, saying David would be a better father anyway and what he doesn't know won't hurt him. The entire conversation read like a conspiracy novel. There were time-stamped specific alibis, contingency plans, even a shared calendar where they tracked my work schedule and planned their meetups accordingly. The systematic nature of it all was what got me. This wasn't just an impulsive mistake. It was a calculated, ongoing deception, involving the 3 people who were supposed to love me most. I felt physically sick. I sat at the computer for what must have been hours, reading these emails. Every single one was more devastating than the last. I kept hoping to find something, anything, that would tell me this was all a misunderstanding, a sick joke, something other than what it was. But no, it was painfully clear. I took screenshots of everything and saved them to a flash drive. Then I printed out the most incriminating ones and put them in a folder. I called Victor. I couldn't think straight. Needed someone level-headed. "You need a lawyer," he said. "Now don't confront them yet." Victor knew a good attorney. His second divorce had been complicated. He made the call right there from my living room. Put it on speaker. Olivia Thompson, divorce attorney. Since we lived in a false state, and I had clear evidence of infidelity. Olivia said I was in a strong position. The fact that I had bought the house before marriage meant it wouldn't be considered marital property. Same with most of my investments and savings. She advised me to secure my finances immediately. So Victor drove me to the bank. I moved most of our joint funds into a separate account, leaving enough in the joint account to avoid claims of financial abandonment. I left exactly $5,000 in our joint account, enough to show I wasn't trying to financially strand her, but not enough to fund a new life with my brother. The rest, about $40,000, went into an individual account under just my name. I also called my investment firm and verified that my premarital assets, about $125,000 in various funds, were properly documented as separate property. By the time Natalie came home that night, I had already set things in motion. Olivia was drafting divorce papers. Victor had helped me regain some composure. I didn't confront Natalie that night. I was still in shock, and I needed to think strategically. "How was your shift?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "Exhausting," she said, detailing some fictional emergency room crisis. I watched her lie to my face, thinking about the emails where she described meeting Greg at my mother's house that very day. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal, while my entire life was imploding. She asked why Victor's car had been in our driveway earlier. Apparently the neighbors had mentioned it. I said we'd been discussing a work project. Another lie to add to the pile. Over the next few days, I acted normal while setting everything in motion. I'd go to work, make small talk with Natalie in the evenings, even watched our usual Thursday night show together. All while dying inside, I gathered all my important documents and moved them to a safety deposit box. I froze our joint credit cards. I even installed small cameras in our common areas, totally legal since it was my house. Victor helped me set them up while Natalie was at work, just in case they try to take or destroy anything, he advised. Thomas from hospital administration texted to check in. Turns out he'd seen Natalie and Greg together at a restaurant weeks ago, looking more intimate than in-laws should. He'd been trying to find a way to tell me. I thanked him for trying, told him I figured it out on my own. My plan started forming on Sunday night. Natalie was in the shower when a text notification popped up on her iPad on the coffee table, from Greg saying he couldn't wait to see her tomorrow at Mom's. The betrayal was happening literally every day. Right under my nose, that's when I decided on the dinner plan. I called my dad Monday morning and asked if he could have a family dinner at our place that weekend. Told him I had some good news to share. "Are you sure you want to host?" "Your mom and I can do it," he offered. "No, I insist," I said, thinking about how perfect it would be to confront them all on my territory. I invited Greg and my parents and told Natalie to prepare for a special dinner. She seemed nervous but agreed. I could see the tension in her shoulders when I mentioned Greg was coming. She texted constantly that day, probably coordinating stories with him and Mom. In the days leading up to the dinner, I met with Olivia twice more. She had drafts of the divorce filing ready. Olivia called Thursday with an update. The divorce papers would be ready Friday morning. I picked them up during my lunch break, the manila envelope burning a hole in my backpack all afternoon. The day of the dinner, I took the afternoon off work to prepare everything. Food ordered from this nice Italian place downtown. No way I was cooking. Divorce papers in a manila envelope, and a folder of emails in a larger envelope from my dad. The camera in the dining room was recording, just in case things got out of hand, and I needed proof later. I had another surprise ready too. I'd cashed out some stock options, and had a cashier's check for $12,000 made out to my dad. The exact amount I knew my parents had recently loaned Greg to pay off his credit cards. I figured Dad should get his money back before the family imploded. My parents arrived first at 6:30 p.m. Mom gave me this weird tight hug, and immediately asked where Natalie was. "She's upstairs getting ready," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Greg showed up last at 6:45. He had this cocky smile that made me want to punch him on sight. He gave me one of those bro hugs, slapping my back like we were still close. I had to use every ounce of self-control not to react. Natalie came downstairs in this red dress I'd bought her for our anniversary. We all sat down for dinner. I stayed calm, making small talk about work, the weather, Dad's golf game. Mom kept glancing nervously between Natalie and Greg. Natalie barely touched her food, just pushed it around her plate after the main course. Dad raised his glass. "So what's this good news you wanted to share with us?" I smiled, reached under the table, and pulled out the manila envelope. "Actually, I do have something to share," I said. sliding the envelope across the table to Natalie. "These are divorce papers." The room went dead silent. Natalie's face went white. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, not opening the envelope. "I know everything, Natalie. About you and Greg, about the baby that might be his, about Mom helping you hide it all." I kept my voice steady even though I was raging inside. Mom gasped dramatically. "How dare you accuse them of such a thing? Natalie would never—" I cut her off by pulling out the second envelope and handing it to my dad. "These are emails between Mom and Natalie discussing the affair and how to hide it from me. It'd been going on for at least 3 months. Dad's hands shook as he started reading. The color drained from his face. Greg stood up suddenly, knocking over his chair. "You had no right to go through her emails," he shouted. Like that was the real crime here. "I think I had every right to know my wife is screwing my brother and might be pregnant with his kid," I said, still keeping my voice level. "How long were you planning to hide that, Natalie? Were you just going to pass it off as mine?" Natalie burst into tears. "It's not what you think," she sobbed. "I love you. It was a mistake." "A 3-month mistake with my brother while my mother covered for you?" I laughed. But there was no humor in it. "And now you're pregnant." Mom tried to reach for the papers Dad was reading, but he held them away from her. "Patricia, what is this?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Did you help them hide this from David?" My mother's face had gone from fake shock to panic. "Natalie, you told me you were sure it was David's," she said suddenly, throwing Natalie under the bus to save herself. Dad looked up from the emails, his face hard as stone. "Patricia, did you know about this? Did you help them hide this from our son?" His voice was quiet but deadly serious. Mom started crying, trying to play victim. "I was just trying to protect the family. Greg made a mistake, but breaking up the family wouldn't help anyone." Greg, the smug piece of shit, actually scoffed. "Come on, it's not that big a deal. Natalie and I connected, it happens. David is always working anyway, barely pays attention to her." Something in me snapped. I stood up, walked around the table, and punched him square in the nose. There was a satisfying crack, and blood immediately started pouring down his face. He stumbled back, knocking over a side table. Mom screamed, rushing to Greg. "David, what is wrong with you?" Dad stood up then, looking more angry than I'd ever seen him. "Enough, Patricia. Our son just found out his wife and brother betrayed him in the worst possible way, and you're worried about Greg's nose." He pointed at Greg. "Get out of this house now." Greg held his bleeding nose, glaring at all of us. "This isn't over. You're going to regret this." He spat before storming out the front door. Mom tried to follow him, but Dad grabbed her arm. "You stay right here. We have a lot to discuss about your role in all this." Natalie was still crying at the table. "David, please, we can work through this. I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake." I turned to her, feeling nothing but cold contempt. "I want a paternity test if you're keeping this baby. I need to know if it's mine. And either way, we're done." I handed the cashier's check to my dad. "This is to pay back what Greg borrowed recently. I figured you should get your money back before everything falls apart." Dad looked at the check, then back at me with sad eyes. "Son, I had no idea any of this was happening." Mom was frantically trying to explain herself, saying she just wanted to protect Greg, that she knew it was wrong, but thought it would just be a phase, that she didn't want to hurt me. Dad wasn't having any of it. He told her to get her coat. They were leaving. After my parents left, Natalie and I sat in silence for what felt like hours. Finally, she spoke. "What happens now? Now you pack a bag and leave. The house is mine. It's not community property. You've got until tomorrow to figure out where you're going, but it won't be here." She nodded slowly, then went upstairs to pack. I sat at the dining table, surrounded by the wreckage of what I thought was my life, feeling strangely calm. The worst had happened, and I had survived it. Everything from here on out would be rebuilding. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyer meetings and paperwork. Natalie moved out to stay with a friend, not with Greg, interestingly enough. I had changed the locks the day after the dinner. The paternity test was scheduled once it was safe to perform one. Natalie agreed without argument. I think part of her was hoping the baby was mine, thinking that might change things. Then 2 weeks after the dinner, I got served with a misdemeanor assault charge, courtesy of Greg, who had the nerve to report the punch to the police. My lawyer, Olivia, wasn't overly concerned. First offense, no weapon, and a situation with emotional provocation. Not a legal defense per se, but potentially relevant for sentencing. She made it clear the court wouldn't ignore the assault, but context could work in my favor. 3 months later, we had our hearing. Greg showed up with his arm around Mom, playing the victim like a pro. I came with Olivia and 2 character witnesses from work, including Victor, who spoke to my history of professionalism and restraint. The judge reviewed the incident, heard testimony about the circumstances leading up to it, and accepted some contextual evidence regarding the affair, not as justification but as background. In the end, the court found me guilty of simple assault and imposed a $500 fine, noting that it was an isolated act in response to a deeply personal betrayal. The judge didn't mince words, saying I had let emotions override better judgment, but also implied that Greg was fortunate things hadn't escalated further. Mom looked mortified. Greg glared like he expected applause. I considered it $500 well spent. Dad called me the day the assault charges were filed. He was furious. Not at me, but at Greg. He told me he'd already taken steps to remove Greg from his will entirely. When Mom found out, she apparently had a complete meltdown, threatening to leave Dad if he went through with it. I told her she was welcome to leave, but she should know I'd make sure she got nothing. If she chose Greg over our family, Dad told me that shut her up pretty quick. My dad's finances are no joke. 30 years at his engineering firm. Smart investments. Real estate holdings. No wonder Mom freaked out when Dad threatened to cut Greg out. Mom's true colors showed through this whole thing. She'd raised Greg to think he could do no wrong. And now she was facing the consequences of creating such an entitled jerk. Dad said she was still moping around the house, crying about how her family was falling apart. But at least she'd stopped defending Greg openly. Dad came by the house a week after the dinner. He brought his tools and helped me repaint the living room and master bedroom, erasing any hint of Natalie's decorating choices. We didn't talk much while we worked, but when we finished, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You're handling this better than I would have at your age. I'm proud of you." That meant more than he knew. I went back to work after a week off. Victor had told the team I was dealing with family issues and needed space. When I returned, he'd moved my desk to a different floor from Greg's department. Smart move. I found out later that Victor had also put Greg on a performance improvement plan, citing ethical concerns in his file. Technically, sleeping with your brother's wife isn't a fireable offense, but Victor found ways to make Greg's work life difficult, without crossing any HR lines. Natalie's religious parents found out about everything from my dad, who felt they deserved to know what their daughter had done. They were devastated. Her dad called me personally to apologize, saying they had raised her better than this. They told Natalie she wasn't welcome in their home until she found her way back to God. Pretty harsh, but I couldn't blame them for being disappointed. Greg and Natalie eventually ended up renting an apartment together, though from what I heard, they were far from happy. Mom was their only visitor, sneaking over when she thought Dad wouldn't notice. I cut all three of them out of my life completely, changed my number, blocked their emails, the works. Dad was the only family member I still talked to. The paternity test results came back. The baby wasn't mine. In a way, it was a relief. A clean break with no biological ties to maintain. The divorce proceedings went smoothly after that, with the infidelity proven, and the paternity test confirming it wasn't my child. Since we lived in a fault state, Natalie got almost nothing. I kept the house, my retirement accounts, and most of our assets. She didn't even fight it. I think she knew she had no grounds to. Our friends mostly took my side, especially after they learned the full story. A few tried to stay neutral, saying there are two sides to every story, but they faded away pretty quickly. My real friends stepped up, invited me over for dinner, checked in regularly, didn't let me isolate myself. I threw myself into work, took on a new project, rebuilding a major insurance company's security infrastructure. The 70-hour weeks kept my mind off everything. Victor started grooming me for a technical director position. Faster advancement than I'd expected, but I was ready for it. I also joined a gym, hired a trainer who kicked my ass 3 times a week, lost the 15 pounds I'd gained during my marriage, put on some muscle, started running again, did a half marathon 6 months after the divorce. Dating was the last thing on my mind for a long time. Friends tried to set me up, but I wasn't ready. Trust issues don't disappear overnight. 6 months after everything went down, I was in a good place. The divorce was finalized. The assault charges were settled with a small fine, and I'd been promoted at work. The house was finally feeling like mine again. After I renovated and got rid of everything that reminded me of Natalie, I completely gutted the master bathroom. New tile, new fixtures, new everything. Converted the guest bedroom into a home gym, built a custom entertainment center in the living room. The house became a project that kept my hands busy and my mind focused. By the time I was done, it looked nothing like the place where Natalie and I had lived together. My finances were looking better than ever. The promotion came with a $22,000 salary bump plus stock options. I maxed out my 401k contributions, started a separate investment account, and even began looking at rental properties as potential income sources. At 30, I was in a better financial position than most guys my age, especially without a wife draining my resources. Then out of nowhere, I got a text from Mom asking to meet at a diner downtown. Said it was important, and she needed to talk to me in person. I agreed to meet her during my lunch break, making it clear I only had 30 minutes. When I arrived at the diner, I immediately regretted coming. Mom wasn't alone. Natalie was sitting next to her, looking exhausted. With a baby carrier on the booth seat, I almost walked out, but Mom spotted me and waved frantically. I went over and sat down across from them, not bothering with greetings. "What is this?" I asked, looking directly at Mom. She had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Your father doesn't know I'm here," she admitted. "But I needed to talk to you. Greg's been arrested." That got my attention. "Arrested for what?" "He was caught embezzling money from the company, and he also got a DUI last week," Mom said, her voice cracking. "He's facing serious jail time. I need your help to bail him out." I just stared at her in disbelief. "You want me to bail out the brother who slept with my wife, got her pregnant, and then pressed assault charges against me? Are you insane?" Looking closer, I could see Mom's designer handbag was scraped and worn. Her manicure chipped. Dad must have cut off her spending. Good for him. Natalie spoke up then, her voice small. "Greg left us right after Lily was born," she said, gesturing to the baby. "He said he wasn't ready to be a father. He was drinking a lot. Sometimes he'd get angry, push me around." I felt nothing. Not satisfaction that their relationship had imploded. Not pity for her situation. Just nothing. "He hit her, David," Mom said, like that would somehow make me care. "And now she's alone with the baby. No job, no support." I looked at Natalie. "And what do you want from me?" She started crying. "I don't know what to do. My parents won't talk to me. I can't work with a newborn. Greg drained our bank account before he got arrested. I thought maybe you could help. Just until I get back on my feet." I sat back and looked at these two women who had betrayed me, now asking me for help, because the guy they chose over me had proven to be exactly the piece of shit I always knew he was. Where was that family loyalty when you were helping them hide their affair from me? When you convinced Natalie to try to pass off this baby as mine? I almost laughed. "I made a mistake," Mom said, tears welling up. "I thought I was protecting everyone." "No, you were protecting your favorite," I said flatly. "And now you're still choosing him even after everything he's done." Mom leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Your father's being unreasonable. He's frozen all our accounts. I can't access any money without his approval. He's talking about divorce if I don't cut ties with Greg completely." "Sounds reasonable to me," I said. "Dad's finally standing up for himself." I stood up, taking out my wallet. I dropped one card on the table. "For a women's shelter. This place can help you, Natalie. I won't. As for Greg, he can rot in jail for all I care." I looked at Mom. "Don't contact me again. Tell Dad I miss him, and he's welcome to call me anytime." I walked out without looking back. In my car, I sat for a moment, expecting to feel something. Anger, vindication, maybe even pity. But nope, they weren't my problem anymore. I'd rebuilt my life from the ashes they'd left, and I was doing just fine without them. That night, Dad called me. He'd figured out where Mom had gone and why. He apologized for her behavior, and assured me he had no intention of helping Greg either. We talked for almost an hour. About work, about the house, about the new woman I'd been seeing. Normal father-son stuff. Then months later, I heard through mutual friends that Greg had taken a plea deal. 18 months for embezzlement. Natalie had moved back to her hometown, apparently reconciled with her parents enough that they were helping with the baby. As for me, the promotion at work turned into a director position, overseeing a team of 15 security specialists. I bought a rental property that's already generating positive cash flow. I'm planning a 2-week hiking trip through Yellowstone next summer, something I've always wanted to do but never made time for. Life isn't perfect, but I'm moving forward, and I know now that I'm stronger than I ever thought.